MiHoYo was founded in 2012 in Shanghai, China by three Weebs, Kai Haoyu, Lu Yuhao, and Li Wei, three computer science students from Shanghai Jiao Tong University who shared an interest in technology and anime comics games culture. In fact, the name Hoyo, the H and Y come from Haoyu and Yu Hao, and the Mi comes from Hatsune Miku. I wonder why there's no W from Wei, could have been MiHoYo, whoa. Anyways, before being established, they made an open source literature community which won them 200,000 yuan at a competition. They later in 2010 developed an isometric tile-based game engine called the Misato engine, using Adobe Flash Player. In fact, the name Misato comes from Katsuragi Misato from Neon Genesis Evangelion, an anime that I have never seen. They later used an upgraded version of the engine and made a game called Legend of Saha for a Flash game development competition held during the second China Game Developers Conference, and won a cash prize of 30,000 yuan by Shanda Games, who also later outsourced them to develop a game called Bubble Hero. In 2011, they set up the MiHoYo studio in the university dorm, and later that year, Li Wei, who represented the group, participated in the New Entrepreneur Talents competition and won third place, and thus MiHoYo was awarded a 50 square meter office with a term of 6 months and a 100,000 yuan interest-free loan. Now, neither of the three founders had artistic ability, so they found a guy via Tencent, a Chinese social media app, called Zhang Xinghua, who was an undergrad art and design student. The first character he made for them was Kiana Kaslana, who was the main character of their first game, Fly Me to the Moon. They launched Fly Me to the Moon in 2011, and in fact, the Fly Me to the Moon is the name of the ending song of Neon Genesis Evangelion, and also served as the basis of the concept of the game. It was basically a puzzle game. The game, however, received little financial success, and the three founders only had a monthly income of 4,000 yuan. They struggled to get outside investment as anime and gaming, at least back in those times, were not mainstream. But they did eventually get an angel investment of 1 million yuan from Hangzhou Sky Network Technology, which was their only outside funding. In 2012, they officially incorporated their company and they started to think about their next game. They got inspired by an anime manga series, High School of the Dead. No, this is not a joke. I am dead serious. The next game, which was their first game since incorporating the company, was Hokai Gakuen, also known as Zombie Girl Kawaii, a side-scrolling shooter game. In 2013, they released Hokai Gakuen 2, also known as Gun Girl C, a pick-up-and-play arcade action game. They used underlying data, art assets, and core gameplay from the previous game, which is the reason why they were able to release it so quickly after the first game. The game did have some financial success, but it also had many technical problems, such as top-up failure and server downtime that were difficult to manage for a team of 7 people. Yeah, there's still only 7 people doing this thing. Then after hiring some more staff in 2014, they began development for Honkai Impact 3rd. They started working on making their own engine for the game. They made a physics-based animation system that can simulate the performance of various bodies based on physical formulas, showing more realistic character movements and destructive scene effects. They developed technologies for 3D modeling, light mapping, and real-time and pre-rendering systems. They also studied games like Guilty Gear that used 3D cell shading, and apparently, creating the artwork, model, and animation of Kiana Kaslana, the main character of this game as well, took 6 months, as the transition from 2D to 3D was a big challenge. The game was finally released in 2016, featuring Kiana Kaslana as the main character, and this time it was a 3D action hack-and-slash game. It also featured gacha mechanics, which is where you can gamble for anime girls. And in this game, it was only anime girls. Men are not allowed. Well, except for this guy, but everyone hates him, apparently. Actually, I don't know if they hate him. My sources, one guy, Discord, I know who plays this game. But anyways, for a game that came out in 2016 that looked like this on a phone, was honestly quite impressive. The game was quite successful in China and was then also released internationally, and it did quite well. It was their first major commercial hit. The game also has some really high quality animated shorts on YouTube, and some really good music. The latter especially helped their later games really stand out. Fun fact, MiHoYo actually tried to file for an IPO in 2017 to the China Securities Regulatory Commission and was planning to raise 1 billion yuan, but they ended up withdrawing the application in 2020. There's no official reason why, so it's all up to speculation, but if it had gone through, it might have been a completely different story from here. Now I know you know what's coming up next, but there's actually another game that they released just a few months before Genshin in 2020. Tears of Themis, an otome visual novel gacha game that has romance and detective elements. It had 650,000 pre-registrations, and it also received the Pocket Gamer People's Choice Award in 2022. The game takes place in 2030 in a sci-fi setting, and the player plays as a female defense lawyer who works with 4 male love interests to solve cases. Wow. And a few months later came out Genshin Impact. But the development of this game started all the way back in 2017. After Kai played Breath of the Wild, they took inspiration from that game's open world exploration experience, and some other inspirations came from random events of GTA, strategy in Divinity Original Sin, and from the game developer Naughty Dog. Apparently, it cost them $100 million to make the game, but fear not, they made it back in just 2 weeks after the game launched. Much of the game's budget was invested in music production, apparently, and I have to say, their music is pretty good. In 2022, they also released a VTuber called Lumi, which then became part of the Noah desktop project, which allows users to interact with Lumi on their PC or mobile phones. Yeah, cool. In 2022, MiHoYo rebranded to Hoyoverse for markets outside China under a new company they created in Singapore called Cognosphere. In 2023, they launched Honkai Star Rail, a turn-based RPG gacha game, which made quite a lot of money, sometimes, or a lot of times, more so than even Genshin. Which is funny because people thought a turn-based game wouldn't be as popular, but oh boy, gambling for anime girls and anime boys. Whoa, that's gonna make some money. And in 2024, they launched ZZZ, an urban fantasy action RPG gacha game, which did quite well on launch, but has apparently fallen behind the other 2 big Hoyo games in terms of revenue. Now, there's not much to say about these newer games, as at this point Hoyoverse has become quite established as a gacha game developer, and a lot of systems and mechanics in these games have a lot of similarity to each other as well. They went from 3 weebs in college making games to a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And that's the story of Hoyoverse.